All right, let's just jump right in. AI is moving at an absolutely breakneck speed. I mean, we're seeing new models, crazy new capabilities, and these things called agentic workflows, where AI can basically act on its own to do complex stuff, popping up what feels like every single day. But the rules we're using to manage it, honestly, they're from another era, designed for a tech world that just doesn't exist anymore. So you kind of have to ask the big question right up front. What if the entire rulebook we're trying to use for AI is already fundamentally broken? And that's a really serious thought, because if that foundation is cracked, then everything we try to build on top of it is going to be unstable.
And that leads us to the heart of the problem, this thing called the governance gap. The best way to picture it is as this giant, dangerous void that's opened up between how fast the tech is moving and how slow the rules are to catch up. And inside that gap, all sorts of risks, financial, ethical, you name it, are just growing completely unchecked.
Okay, so section 1, let's really dig into why that old rulebook is so totally out of date. And we're not just talking about needing a few minor updates here. We're talking about a complete mismatch between the kind of problem AI is and the solutions we're trying to throw at it. So check this out. The old way of thinking was all about being technology specific. You'd have these really rigid rules for, say, neural networks. But guess what? As soon as a totally new type of model comes along, those rules are basically worthless. The new way, it's technology-agnostic. It couldn't care less how the AI got to the answer. It only cares about two things. The what was the final outcome? And the why, can you justify it? And that simple shift is what makes this whole approach future-proof.
Which brings us to the really big idea here. What if we could have a single, universal framework for governance that could handle any kind of AI? Not just the stuff we have today, but all the wild, complex systems we're going to have tomorrow.
We call this a technology-agnostic framework, and honestly, the absolute best way to think about it is like a universal charger for your phone, right? You don't need a different charger for every single gadget you own, you just have one that works for everything. Well, this framework is the exact same idea, but for AI. It applies these universal rules, like fairness, transparency, and safety, to any model out there, no matter how it was built. Now, this isn't just some high-level theory. Let's actually look at how this approach is already being put to the test in some of the most high-stakes industries you can imagine. First up, healthcare. The big challenge here is something called clinical autonomy. Basically, how do you balance the incredible, hard-won judgment of a human doctor with a recommendation from an AI that's super standardized and data-driven? It's a tricky balance, and the patient's safety is right there in the middle. And this is exactly where Universal Framework changes the game. Instead of just chasing the highest accuracy score, it prioritizes something else, interpretability. The rule is no longer be 99% accurate. The rule is you have to be able to explain to a doctor why you're suggesting this diagnosis. See? That empowers the doctor. It doesn't try to replace them. It also forces you to think about safety from day one, making sure the data you train on is representative so you don't build unfair biases right into the system. Okay, now let's switch gears to finance. Here, the name of the game is algorithmic accountability. If an AI turns someone down for a loan, regulators and, the actual person have a legal right to know why. You can't just throw up your hands and say, hey, the computer said no. So this is where that agnostic principle is so crucial. The framework says everyone has a right to an explanation, and it doesn't matter if the decision came from a simple spreadsheet or a massive neural network. It also helps manage this really interesting systemic risk called model contagion. It's this wild idea that if every single bank starts using the exact same AI model, they could all fail at the exact same time for the exact same reason. And for our last example, let's look at the auto industry. They have this amazing concept that is just perfect for understanding modern AI. It's called SOTF, which stands for Safety of the Intended Functionality. And it asks this critical question. What do you do when the AI isn't broken, when it's working exactly the way it was designed to, but the result is still incredibly dangerous? Think about it. A self-driving car sees a reflection in a puddle, thinks it's a real obstacle, and swerves into another lane. The software didn't have a bug. It did what it was trained to do. SOTF is the rulebook for managing these unknown unknowns, and this is such a brilliant way to think about AI hallucinations. The model isn't broken when it hallucinates. It's just predicting the next word perfectly based on its training. The problem is that outcome is hazardous. So when you zoom out and look at all these examples, you start to see this governance kernel taking shape. It doesn't matter if you call it clinical validation in a hospital, loan officer review at a bank, or driver handover in a car, the universal principle is exactly the same. You need clear rules for when a human has to step in. These core ideas, oversight, robustness, traceability, fairness, they're like the universal language of good AI governance.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the why, but how do you actually build this stuff? Let's take a quick look at the key pieces of tech that actually make a universal framework like this possible.
The secret sauce is something called a composable architecture. So instead of having this one rigid gatekeeper that everything has to squeeze through, you think of governance more like a flexible service, like a Lego block. The rules get exposed as APIs, which are just little hooks that any application can call out to before it does something. This totally decouples the rules from the technology. It means you can update your AI models without having to rebuild your whole governance system, and you can update your rules without breaking your AI. And the glue that holds all of these blocks together? It's metadata. The perfect analogy is a nutrition label, but for your data. It's all the data about your data. Where did it come from? Who owns it? How sensitive is it? And this label literally travels with the data. So it doesn't matter where it goes or what system uses it, the rules are always attached and always enforced.
But let's be really clear about something. You could have the most brilliant architecture in the world, and it would be totally useless without the right people and the right company culture. Technology is only half the battle here.
And for any of you out there thinking about what you want to do with your career, you should really pay attention to this slide. This is not a side gig. AI governance is a serious, really well-paid, and absolutely critical career path. Companies are throwing major money at this because they know how catastrophic it is to get it wrong.
And getting it right requires a kind of human upgrade. First, we need AI fluency for everybody, not just the data scientists, lawyers, managers, marketers, everyone. Second, you have to change the incentives. If the only thing you reward is being first to market, you're just asking for trouble. Success has to be measured by safety and ethics, too. And finally, you have to create psychological safety. That's a culture where the person who raises their hand and points out a risk is treated like a hero, not like a roadblock.
So, where's all this headed? What's the game plan? Let's wrap up by looking at the roadmap for governing not just the AI we have today, but the much, much more powerful AI that's coming.
The path forward really happens in stages. You start by building that solid foundation of visibility and company-wide literacy. Then you start to integrate the technical architecture we've been talking about. After that comes automation, where you actually start using AI to help govern other AI. And finally, you get to expansion, where you start preparing for these huge, interconnected AI ecosystems and maybe the arrival of AGI, artificial general intelligence. When you boil it all down, this entire effort, the new frameworks, the tech, the culture change, it all really comes down to one simple thing: building trust. Because in the age of AI, trust isn't just a nice to have, it is the ultimate currency. It's the foundation of any real, lasting competitive advantage. Which leaves us with just one last thought to chew on. We know for a fact that AI is learning and evolving at a truly mind-bending speed. The real question is, are we